Welcome to the BEASTwriter family where social media engagement is encouraged. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we are going to be making sense of the Denver Broncos stealing cornerback Patrick Surtain in the first round, and then they stole Javonte Williams, trading up for him in the second round, and then they doubled down on those gains, or should I say tripling down on those gains, with the additions of Quinn Meinerz and Baron Browning in the third round. So before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to break down those selections and why I believe GM George Paton hit it out of the ballpark and had arguably the best draft out of all 32 NFL teams. But before we go ahead and do that, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for subscribing to my channel. Just be sure to turn on and flip on the bell notifications so you get notified when I go live or when I upload content. Also, I'm looking at my analytics, and I'm seeing about 38% of you guys are liking all my stuff, watching all my videos, but have yet to subscribe to my channel. So please do your boy a solid and hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. All right, so let's go ahead and break it down. Again, I like to break down all my podcasts into simplest form and into three parameters. The first parameter is who are the players or the coaches involved. The second parameter is why the move was made or potentially could be made. And the last but not least parameter, obviously, is the instant gratification versus long-term gains. All right, so let's go ahead and break it down brick by brick, layer by layer, as you peel back layer of the onion to get to the core, as I always like to say. All right, so let's pull up the tickers. I know you guys like these tickers here. All right, so first round pick, as you see here, I think it's up there. Yep. Patrick Surtain, the Denver Broncos got a steal in Patrick Surtain at number 9. He was number 1 ranked quarterback on my big board. J.C. Horn, who's my number 2 ranked quarterback, goes 1 pick ahead to the Carolina Panthers with new DM Scott Fitter. And the Denver Broncos went ahead and went best player available. And here's the breakdown as to why they were in a dilemma of either going defense with linebacker Micah Parsons or Patrick Surtain. Obviously, I just said Patrick Surtain was my number 1 ranked quarterback on my big board. However, the need was not there. They didn't have to have this as a specific need pick, and I'll tell you why. The team just signed Ronald Darby to a 3-year, $30 million contract in the offseason, so they solidified one boundary quarterback position. They also signed Kyle Fuller, who was a cap casualty with the Chicago Bears. They needed to get some salary cap health for the 2020 NFL draft, and in doing so, they inked Kyle Fuller, reuniting him just like Bryce Callahan in 2019 to Vic Fangio, who was the DC with the Chicago Bears, to a 1-year, $9.5 million deal. So now you have 2 boundary cornerbacks in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby, and then you can kick Bryce Callahan back inside to his natural slot position. So the need at cornerback was not there. If you watch my earlier podcast in the description box below, you will know what I had to say when Kyle Fuller was signed. Again, I like to tie in earlier podcasts into this one so you guys can kind of stay up to date and see what I had to say in real time then and compare that into real time now. All right, so again, it was a dilemma in George Paton's war room with the Denver Broncos. You have, again, Patrick Surtain, the best cornerback on the board, sitting there at number 9, and you also had a need for another defensive player like Micah Parsons. And people were saying, well, why Micah Parsons? Well, here's some food for thought, and I put this on Twitter, put this on earlier live streams in real time. You can go back and cross-check those. But here's the thinking behind why I believed Micah Parsons, if he was available at number 9, to be the pick. All right. One, he's better suited for a 3-4 base defense. He can play inside. He can play outside. The depth at linebacker is thin for the Denver Broncos. When you look at their depth chart, there's not much there outside of Josie Jewell, I should say. Whatever the case may be, vice versa, whatever. You guys get the picture. And they also have, as in Vic Fangio, he always had a stable of linebackers throughout his career. He always had a stable of 2 or 3 linebackers throughout his career. And you guys are saying, okay, what are you talking about? Vic Fangio has been in the NFL for decades, bro. And let me just break it down, because back in the early 90s, and I was a kid, the New Orleans Saints, when Vic Fangio was there, he had Sam Mills and Ricky Jackson in the early 90s. Ricky Jackson, as you know, would later play on with the San Francisco 49ers from 1994 to 1995, wore number 57, and ultimately helped the 49ers end their quest for 5. With that being said, in the mid 90s. Now let's scroll back another layer. In the mid 90s, with the Carolina Panthers, Vic Fangio had outside linebacker Lamar Lathan and Kevin Green, sack artist Hall of Fame Kevin Green. So again, another dynamic duo at the linebacker position on the second level. Then a few years later, in the 2000s, who do you have? He had a trio of linebackers. With the Ravens, he had middle linebacker Ray Lewis, right? He also had Terrell Suggs, and he also had Bart Scott. And then with the 49ers, all you Niners fans, you guys remember the quartet of linebackers that the 49ers had when Vic Fangio was there. He had Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, Aldon Smith, and Ahmad Brooks. And again, he transformed those linebackers into being all-pro talent. Now, you can say that Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman already had that all-pro potential. Okay, Aldon Smith was a pup, right, coming out of that 2011 draft class. And Ahmad Brooks, if you remember, didn't really hit a ceiling until Jim Harbaugh took over that team as a second-team all-pro. So when you have a quartet of linebackers, you know exactly what you're getting when Vic Fangio is in town. He likes his second-level backers. And then again, trickle-down effect with the Chicago Bears when he was the DC there. As I alluded to that earlier in this podcast, he had who? Roquan Smith, who was drafted number 8 overall in the 2018 NFL draft, just one pick before the 49ers took right tackle Mike McGlinchey, and they also had Khalil Mack. So again, you can see the dynamic duo of linebackers that Vic Fangio loves to have, which is why I believe that they would play for Micah Parsons if he was on the board. But it does make sense to go ahead and select the best player available on the board because, again, Kyle Fuller, that I just mentioned, is on a 1-year prove-it deal. All right, so we don't know what's going to happen with him. You get an insurance policy, the best cornerback in this draft class in Patrick Surtain. And again, he was not only my number 1 ranked player on my big board, he was the 5th best player overall on my big board. So for him to drop to 9, you can see what GM George Paton is doing. He opted to go best player available instead of positional need pick. All right, rolling on to number 2. This is where it gets really interesting, guys. My draft crush, one of my draft crushes, Javonte Williams. The team moved up from number 40 to number 35, moving up 5 picks, yielding only a 4th-round pick, number 144 overall. A win-win for the Denver Broncos because, as you know, who was sitting there at number 36, it was the Miami Dolphins. They could have went running back, so they jumped ahead and leapfrogged the Miami Dolphins. And if you've been keeping up with my pre-draft analysis, I told you that the draft class is not deep, so that's why I believe this is a win for George Paton because, again, yielding a 4th-round pick. Look at the 4th-round picks that were drafted. Not much out there, guys. So if I was George Paton, I would have done this move in a heartbeat. It's a win-win. And again, sitting there at number 40, odd offensive tackle, you could have took Tevin Jenkins. But again, Williams is rated much higher on my big board. In fact, he was the 16th best player on my big board. Tevin Jenkins doesn't even come close. So again, not only getting a player at a position of need, but you're also going for the best player available overall. So again, another win on day 2 in the 2nd round for Javonte Williams. And again, if you want to see an earlier podcast that I did on Javonte Williams on why he would be picked up in the 2nd round, that's also in the description box below. You see how I'm doing this? Tie earlier podcasts into this one. It all holds true months, weeks later. I love it. I love it. I love it. And that's why I did it this way. And again, why did the Denver Broncos go for a guy like Javonte Williams? Well, let's face it. Melvin Gordon is in the last year of his contract. Phillip Lindsay got his contract rescinded on his option, so he left in free agency, and that sets up the franchise up for a future back moving forward. So again, you can see what the Denver Broncos are doing. It was a sound play by them and a really nice play overall by GM George Paton. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the 3rd round as we go ahead and get some things in play because, again, there's a lot of things involved here, and I know you guys love these tickers. So with that being said, in the 3rd round, what happens, guys? In the 3rd round, what happened? What did George Paton do? Well, all he did was he got offensive guard Quinn Meinerz in the 3rd round, number 90 overall. How did that happen? George Paton was trading back, and trading back again, and you saw him do it. He traded number 71, trading back 5 spots to the New York Giants at number 76, picking up a 5th-round pick and recouping draft capital for moving up for Javonte Williams just a few picks earlier. Then what they did was they moved from number 76 down to number 98 with the New Orleans Saints, picking up an additional 3rd-round pick, number 105 overall. So both those picks, Denver traded, ending up being quarterbacks. So doesn't matter who they picked up because they didn't need a quarterback because, again, those guys were coming off the board. They already picked up Patrick Surtain. They didn't have a need for a cornerback. So it was a smart play by them to trade back because ultimately, if they were slated to pick at those spots, the teams that were moving up for those spots ultimately picked cornerbacks, and they don't need a cornerback. So Meinerz falls to them in their lap. He was a Senior Bowl riser. And again, he's going to add competition for Graham Glasgow and 2nd-round pick Dalton Risner. Again, those guys are marginal at best. And Quinn Meinerz was an absolute steal at number 98. An absolute steal. And in doing so, they pick up Baron Browning, an defensive outside linebacker in the 3rd round at number 105. And how they do that, again, I just mentioned how they kept on trading back, ultimately trading back with the New Orleans Saints to number 105. That's how they got that 3rd-round pick, okay, moving back from 76 to 98. So not only do they pick up Quinn Meinerz, they also pick up Baron Browning in the last pick in the 3rd round. And again, this allowed the team to draft Browning. The team already has outside linebacker Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. Look for Browning to work inside first at inside linebacker, and then Vic Fangio can then cross-train him at outside linebacker as the season wears on. But the way I see it, I worked with Vic Fangio over the years covering Harbaugh. He likes his rookies to learn a specific position first and then branch out later on so they can kind of get the game plan on what they're trying to do on the defense side of the football. So eventually, in my opinion, based on my analytics, I believe that Vic Fangio is setting up Baron Browning to take over inside linebacker duties for Alexander Johnson, all right? And then you look at the next picks after that, right? Let me see this ticker's up. Okay, the remaining draft pick selections that the Denver Broncos made, they use a shotgun approach. I talked about this on the earlier live streams as it was happening and unfolding. I said what I'm hearing are teams are going to use the shotgun approach, and they did that. What did they do? They selected 2 strong safeties and 2 defensive ends in the tail ends of rounds 5 through 7. They got Caden Stearns in the 5th round. They also got Jamar Johnson in the 5th round as well. So you can see what I'm talking about there. And then in the 7th round, they pick up Jonathan Cooper, a defensive end, and then roll the dice on back-to-back defensive ends, with the last pick being Marquis Spencer in the 3rd round at number 253. So they use the shotgun approach, guys. And again, why did they use the shotgun approach on those 2 positions? Well, it's fairly simple, right? Kareem Jackson is in the last year of his contract. So they declined his option. He then was released, and then they signed him to a 1-year contract for the upcoming season. So he is an unrestricted free agent. So again, just like the other players that I pointed out, along with Melvin Gordon, those guys are in the last year of their contract. You can see what George Paton is doing. He's setting up his future. All right. And again, this is just going to add from the defensive end position, just more competition for Draymond Jones as camp competition rolls around. So again, nice pickups by GM George Paton. And for all you guys who are wondering who George Paton is, he was GM Rex Spillman's right-hand man. He was a Vikings assistant GM. Okay. So with that being said, a lot to talk about. I hope this all made sense. I'm going to end this podcast. I'm going to end this podcast, and that's it for this specific one. If you like my analysis and insights, be sure to hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. So drop your comments, Denver Broncos fans. What are your thoughts? I love engaging with you on this platform. Please leave your comments. And again, welcome to the BEASTwriter family. Thank you so much for tuning in. That's it for right now. Take care. BEASTwriter out.